If she could lead the tiger there, maybe she could turn the iron against it. She didn't know how, but she was willing to try. She raised her arms, shouting to draw the beast's focus. She waved the broken pole like a sword. The tiger roared and charged. Clara retreated, guiding it. She felt the ground tremble under its paws. Reaching the railing, she vaulted over. The tiger, unable to stop, crashed chest first into the iron. It snarled, jolted by the impact. Clara spun and shoved its head against one of the bars. The metal bit into fur and flesh. The beast writhed. Clara hammered it again with the broken pole, forcing it down further. Her arms were lead, her legs shaking. Every part of her screamed to stop. But each time her body wavered, another surge of energy burst through, fed by the fire of survival. The tiger's roars mixed with her own cries, a primal chorus echoing through the night. In that moment, she knew she was at her very limit, but also that she would not surrender. And with that conviction burning inside her, Clara braced herself for what would come next. The impact against the railing had stunned the tiger and given Clara a fleeting breath of relief. But the beast was far from finished. It rose slowly, shaking its head, regaining balance. Its glowing yellow eyes locked onto Clara once more. She stood trembling, the broken club still in her hand. The strength she'd felt was still there, but her muscles ached, and blood from her wounds had numbed her grip. Still, she refused to give in. She knew the fight was far from over. With a roar that shook the park, the tiger lunged again. Its front paws pounded the ground as it launched itself at her. Clara stepped back, bracing for the blow, but the animal was too fast. Its weight crashed into her like a wave, driving her to the ground. The club slipped from her fingers. The beast landed on top of her, claws tearing the earth beside her face. In that instant, she felt its jaws open above her, fangs glinting, ready to close on her throat. Death loomed only inches away. Then something primal surged through Clara. She had no weapons, no strength in her legs, but she had her hands. Without thinking, she raised her arms and clamped them on the tiger's muzzle. Her fingers dug into its skin and fur, bracing along its snout. With a force she didn't know she had, she pushed, prying upward and downward, fighting to force its jaws apart. The beast growled in surprise, loosening its grip for an instant. Clara seized the gap, wedging one hand between its teeth. Her palms scraped raw against the fangs, but she didn't pull back. With her other hand on top, she shoved with all her strength, holding the mouth open. The animal tried to clamp down, but met the resistance of Clara's bare hands. Her knuckles cracked, her muscles screamed. It was like trying to wrench apart an iron vise. The tiger shook its head, thrashing side to side. Pain seared her hands, but Clara held on. Somewhere deep inside, a voice screamed, "Hold on. The strength is not in your muscles, but in your will." That voice drowned out the pain. The unexpected move threw the tiger off balance. It wasn't used to prey fighting with such defiance. Clara's small hands had become a barrier against its killing jaws. The seconds dragged like hours. Every breath of the beast washed hot and heavy against her face. Gritting her teeth, Clara screamed and pushed harder. Her arms trembled, but did not give way. The tiger's neck tightened, straining, but somehow it couldn't close its mouth completely. Clara struck. With a desperate motion, she pulled one hand free and jammed her fingers into the animal's eye. The tiger shrieked in agony and recoiled instinctively, releasing her. Clara rolled aside, staggering to her feet. Her hands bled, the skin of her palms torn and raw. But she had forced the predator back. It licked its muzzle, shaking its head, trying to recover. Clara had bought herself a few precious seconds. She stood facing it, her body trembling, her hands aflame with pain. Yet she breathed deeply, realizing what she had just done. She had stopped the beast's jaws from closing on her throat, with nothing but her bare hands and raw determination. The fight had shifted. She was no longer just a nurse against a tiger. For a moment, she was a woman who had discovered she could take control. Her hands were weapons, her will a shield. The tiger, wounded in body and pride, stepped back. It roared, but the sound was more frustration than menace. Clara raised her fists, ready to go on. Her hands throbbed, but her blood was now a river of adrenaline and rage. She knew she'd only bought time, that the fight wasn't over. This was a duel of fury and defiance. And Clara, driven mad with determination and adrenaline, was ready for the next wave. The park had turned into an improvised arena. Clara and the tiger stared each other down, breathing hard, measuring their opponent. The wound in the animal's eye still troubled it. It blinked and shook its head nervously. Its growls were rougher now, soaked with rage. Clara's hands throbbed with pain, her arms ached, her clothes were torn, her skin burning in several places. The alcohol that once dulled her senses had mixed with adrenaline, leaving her in a trance where only the fight existed. The tiger didn't hesitate. It shook its head and lunged again, more ferocious than before. Fury radiated from it. Every muscle tensed, claws spread wide. Clara lifted her arms, unarmed now, and dodged the first swipe. The air split with the movement of the beast, but it missed. Instead of retreating, Clara stepped in and drove her fist into its side. Her hand sank into its fur, crashing against hard muscle. The strike didn't stop the animal, but it startled it. The beast whipped around, slashing at her. Its claws ripped her shirt and cut into her skin. Clara cried out in pain, but she didn't back away. Madness consumed her. She threw herself at the tiger, locking her arms around its neck. She didn't try to strangle. It was impossible. But she used her momentum to shove the animal off balance. They crashed to the ground, rolling through dirt and grass, kicking up dust. The tiger's power was overwhelming, but Clara's stubborn will anchored her. She refused to let go. In the fall, the tiger twisted and ended on top, jaws snapping. Clara raised her arm, blocking its fangs from her face. Teeth sank into her forearm. She didn't focus on the pain. Her mind clung to survival. With her free hand, she hammered at its jaw, again and again. Each strike was an act of desperation, of fury. The beast released her arm and roared in her face. Clara felt its hot breath, its rough tongue brushing her skin. Near the edge of the park, a metal trash bin lay overturned. Clara stretched for it, grabbed hold, and with a surge of strength, smashed it against the tiger's head. The metallic clang rang out. The beast reeled, shaking its skull. Clara scrambled to her feet instantly, gripping the bin with both hands, using it as both shield and weapon. The tiger pounced again. She rammed the edge into its side. The blow echoed, forcing the beast back and knocking the breath from its lungs. Seizing the moment, Clara drove it toward the playground bars. The tiger slammed into the metal frame, growling in pain. But its fury was relentless. It spun and struck, claws tearing into the trash bin. Clara let go, diving aside as the beast shredded it to pieces. The bin toppled, useless. Without pause, the tiger came at her. This time, Clara met it with bare hands once again, seizing its thick neck fur gripping tight. Her fingers dug deep into its hide. The animal's raw power dragged her, pulled her, but her mind screamed only one command: don't let go. The fight was nothing but brute force and unbreakable will. Clara screamed wildly, a sound torn between pain and rage. The tiger roared back. The park rang with their struggle. The crash of bodies, the snap of branches, the rasp of ragged breath. At moments, clarity flickered through Clara's mind. She saw herself from outside. a lone woman locked in combat with a massive beast. It was an image that defied all reason. But then she was swept back into the chaos, driven only by her will to live. At last, in an almost instinctive move, Clara shoved the tiger into one of the swings. They slammed into the metal frame, tilting it. The beast staggered, shaken by the blow. Clara snatched a shard of metal from the ground and struck its flank with all her strength. The tiger howled in pain and rage. Clara stood her ground, bleeding hands clenched, eyes burning. She knew that stubborn defiance, more than strength, was the only thing keeping her on her feet. Before we dive back into this intense story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a thumbs up so more people can experience this journey with us. Your support helps us keep creating amazing stories. Sparkles, and now, let's continue. The park had turned into an improvised arena. Clara and the tiger locked eyes, both heaving for breath, sizing each other up. The wound in the beast's eye still troubled it. It blinked and shook its head nervously. Its growls were rougher now, thick with rage. Clara felt sweat mix with blood on her skin. The metallic scent of it filled the air. She paused for a single second, chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. The tiger, wounded in its flank and blinded on one side, panted as well, no less fierce. The scene no longer belonged to the ordinary world. It felt like something out of legend. Without warning, the tiger struck again. It launched from its hind legs, swiping straight for Clara's torso. Its claws tore through her shirt and sank into her flesh. Pain flared like fire, stealing her breath. A deep gash opened across her abdomen, blood spilling fast. Clara screamed, a sound of agony and defiance, but she didn't surrender. The wound was grave. She could feel the heat of her blood pouring out. Yet her mind refused to yield. The nurse reacted on instinct. One hand pressed against the wound to slow the bleeding. The other shoved against the tiger's head, forcing it back a step. The beast faltered, startled by her resistance. Clara staggered toward a nearby iron bench, where a length of chain hung loose. With her free hand she yanked it free, scraping her skin against the rough metal. Tiny cuts bloomed across her palm, but she didn't stop. Blood streamed from her other hand, hot and constant. Nothing in her life as a nurse had prepared her for this. The tiger prowled closer, licking the blood from its muzzle, eyes narrowing. It was ready to finish her. Clara doubled the chain in her grip, fashioning a crude noose. As the beast leapt, she swung it wide and caught its neck. The metal tightened. Clara braced her body and pulled with all her might. The chain bit into the animal's flesh. The tiger roared and twisted, thrashing for freedom. It was a tug-of-war between raw muscle and relentless will. Her bloody hands slipped against the links, but she didn't let go. It looked absurd, like a nightmare play. A massive predator straining for release, and a battered night shift nurse holding it back with nothing but a chain and her will. The air filled with roars, grunts, and the screech of metal. Reality itself seemed to split. And then, the first witnesses appeared. Village watchmen, drawn by the noise, froze at the edge of the park. Their faces were pale with disbelief. One held a phone, trembling as he filmed, too stunned to intervene. The glow of the screen lit Clara's blood-soaked abdomen, the crimson streaming into the dirt. The tiger lunged forward in a desperate bid to break free. Clara felt the chain slipping through her slick fingers. Her palms slid with her own blood. Her legs nearly gave out, but she roared in answer, pulling with everything left inside her. The beast lost balance and crashed to the ground, its skull striking the dirt. The chain slackened for a moment, but Clara yanked it tight again. The iron cut deeper into its neck. The tiger kicked, clawed, strained, but pain and exhaustion were overtaking it. Clara felt her own strength fading. Blood loss blurred her vision. The edges of the world darkened. But she looked up and saw them. The watchers, the villagers. Some shouted her name. Others stood frozen, silent, unable to believe. Their cries mixed with the tiger's roars, the grind of chain against flesh, the pounding in her ears. And in that storm of chaos, Clara realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was proof that reality could be stranger, harsher, and greater than fiction. She pulled once more, screaming as she wrenched the chain tighter. The tiger gave one last roar, weaker this time. Its body shuddered, then went still for a few long seconds. Clara eased her grip, watching its massive head slump against the earth. Blood seeped into the soil, mingling with her own. She swayed on her feet, drenched in red. Pressing her hand to the wound in her abdomen, she stared at the beast's shallow breaths. The truth hit her like a thunderclap. She had stopped a predator with her bare hands. She had lived through something no one would believe, if not for the witnesses who had seen it with their own eyes. The line between possible and impossible was gone. The park, which only moments before had been the stage of an impossible battle, now lay silent. The tiger's roar had faded, replaced by shallow gasps that dwindled into nothing but a sigh. The chain, still taut, rested in Clara's hands. The massive body of the beast lay a few meters away, a hulking mass of muscle that had been pure fury, now still upon the earth. Its fur, once gleaming beneath circus lights, was stained with blood and dirt. Black stripes cut across dark patches of wet soil. Its head lay tilted, eyes half open, fixed on nothing. Clara didn't release the chain right away. She stared at the tiger, hoping, fearing it might move again. Silence filled her mind, the echoes of roars still reverberating. Her legs buckled, and dizziness forced her to her knees. Her bloodied hands pressed against the wound in her abdomen while the other clung to the chain. She drew a deep breath, fighting the pain and the adrenaline still rushing through her. Warm blood seeped between her fingers. Her eyes stayed on the beast, waiting for any sign. But the animal did not stir. Its chest no longer rose. One by one, the people who had witnessed the scene crept closer. No one spoke. An elderly woman crossed herself, whispering a prayer. A child peered wide-eyed from behind his mother's skirt. A group of youths lowered their phones, too overwhelmed to keep filming. The watchman approached Clara, stopping a few paces away, unsure whether to help or let her catch her breath. The silence was thick, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the wind and the first tentative whispers as the shock loosened its grip. Clara raised her head. She saw the faces around her, reflections of horror and awe. A strange weight pressed on her chest, more than pain, more than exhaustion. She had done something no one expected, not even herself. She clutched the edge of a bench, trying to rise, but her legs collapsed. Two watchmen rushed in, catching her shoulders. "Easy, don't get up too fast," one murmured, as if afraid to disturb the silence. She nodded faintly, grateful. She still held the chain, as though it were part of her. Slowly, she opened her hand and let it drop with a dull clang. A neighbor edged toward the tiger's body, circling it in disbelief. His hand stretched out, then froze. Another man, bolder or more reckless, touched the fur. "It's dead," he whispered. The words spread among the onlookers. A woman broke into sobs, releasing the tension. A young man covered his mouth, suppressing a cry of terror or relief. Every reaction was different, but all carried the same truth, disbelief. A massive tiger, roaming loose, killed in the town's park, brought down by a nurse who hours earlier had walked silent hospital halls. Clara slumped back against the bench. Her hands felt foreign, slick with blood. She glanced at the chain on the ground, the animal's body, her own torn flesh. None of it felt real. She lifted her gaze skyward. The stars burned faintly, and the moon, silent witness to the battle, still hovered above. A silver beam fell across the tiger, casting its body like a statue, frozen in time. For a moment, it looked carved in stone, destined to be remembered. Clara closed her eyes. Silence, at last, was her refuge. Sirens began to echo in the distance. Reinforcements, promised hours earlier, were finally arriving. Red and blue lights spilled into the park, blending with the moon's glow. Vehicles stopped, and officers stepped out cautiously, unsure of what awaited. They found the scene already settled. The beast fallen, the woman wounded, the villagers circled around, silence draped like a shroud. A paramedic knelt beside Clara, examining her wound. His hands moved automatically, practiced. "Stay with me. We're taking you to the hospital," he said. Clara gave a weak smile. Reality was catching her again. She was no longer the hero, but the patient. Officers surrounded the tiger, photographing, documenting. One draped a tarp over part of the body, half respect, half dread. Its sheer weight made it hard to move. A few men volunteered to help. Clara watched it all with dim eyes. Every motion burned into her memory. Someone slipped a coat over her shoulders. The cold crept in now that adrenaline ebbed away. The hush of the park broke little by little into murmurs, but the air remained heavy with reverence. The sharp click of a camera drew every gaze. A reporter from the local paper had arrived, snapping photos from every angle. Those images would make the front page by morning, spreading far beyond the village. The legend of Clara and the tiger had begun. Clara herself thought only of the blood slipping from her wound, of her aching need to close her eyes. The final silence had arrived. The beast lay still, disbelief hung in the air, and the night, at last, began to yield to the first light of dawn. Night gave way to dawn. The first rays of sunlight spilled through the village streets, touching rooftops and pushing back the darkness that had been the backdrop of the battle. The cool morning air carried with it a sense of cleansing, as if it meant to wash away the horror and disbelief of the night before. Yet the traces of what had happened remained, etched into the park's soil and seared into the minds of those who had witnessed it. Those who hadn't been there awoke to the story on their neighbors' lips. It spread like fire. A nurse killed a tiger with her bare hands, some claimed. The escaped circus tiger died in the park, said others. The versions shifted depending on who spoke. Some painted Clara as a guardian angel. Others called her a reckless madwoman. Words tangled with emotion. Shock, fear, awe. Even for those who had seen it with their own eyes, it was hard to believe. Reality itself felt like it had slipped into the realm of myth. The local newspaper, usually filled with stories of daily life, prepared a headline that would travel beyond the village. The editor, eyes swollen from working all night, flipped through the photos again and again. One showed Clara kneeling, blood-soaked hands beside the tiger's body. Another captured the villagers gathered around the fallen beast, some with tears in their eyes. The chosen cover image showed the tiger draped in a tarp, with the headline, "A Night of Terror and Heroism. Nurse fights tiger bare-handed." It read like something out of another world, but it was true. With the sunrise came that front page, ready to be sold on every corner. Regional television channels soon carried the story. Reporters arrived at the park to film in daylight. The tiger's claw marks were still carved into the earth, streaks of dried blood on the ground. A reporter pointed to a bent swing set bar. "This is where the fight happened. Clara Fernandez stood here against the beast." Villagers approached the cameras, offering their accounts, each version embroidered with exaggeration. The story grew louder, bigger, with every retelling. Rumor tangled with fact. At the market, a woman swore Clara had made a pact with the saints for superhuman strength. Another insisted the tiger had wept before dying. An old man on the plaza told anyone who would listen that the nurse had shoved the beast aside with one hand. Children repeated the tale in hushed voices, wide-eyed, like a bedtime ghost story. The line between reality and legend blurred further still. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Clara lay in a bed surrounded by doctors and nurses. Her wound had been stitched. The doctors had stabilized her. An IV bag hung overhead, monitors tracking her pulse and breath. A nurse took her hand. "You're strong," he said softly, trying to smile. Clara could only nod. Her body ached. Every muscle screamed. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she still saw the tiger's glowing eyes. At other moments, she caught whispers of the rumors trickling through the halls. She wasn't ready to become a figure spoken of by everyone. The sudden weight of fame felt as heavy as the beast itself. By mid-morning, the circus director arrived at the hospital. His suit was wrinkled, his face drawn and weary. He came to apologize. Clara listened as best she could, her mind drifting in and out of pain and fatigue. He explained the cages had failed in the storm, that the tiger had escaped. His voice cracked as he tried to justify it. Clara, barely conscious, nodded without judgment. She knew he, too, would face consequences. In the village square, a priest held an impromptu mass. He thanked heaven no more lives had been lost and prayed for the animal's soul. Some bowed their heads with him. Others wandered the park, staring at the marks left behind in disbelief. The story filled every home, every shop. Daily life had shifted, reshaped by what they had witnessed. The headlines spread. At the bus station, travelers stared at the paper in disbelief. On social media, the story circulated with pictures and stunned captions. Some praised Clara's courage. Others condemned circuses for keeping wild beasts in cages at all. Debate flared. What had begun as a rumor in the night had become a regional story. As the sun climbed higher, the village tried to slip back into routine. But something had changed. Reality had revealed that the impossible could crash into the ordinary at any moment. And though some longed to leave it behind, the story lingered. Witnesses relived the scene again and again. Rumors multiplied, growing more surreal with every telling. Dawn had brought more than light. It had brought a tale that felt as though it belonged to another dimension. The hours after dawn filled with divided opinions. As the village tried to return to routine, Clara's story became the subject of every conversation, on every street corner, every screen, every mind. Some couldn't stop repeating the words nurse and tiger in the same sentence. Others added a new word that twisted the narrative: drunk. It didn't take long for a rumor to spread. That Clara had been drinking during her shift, that she had faced the tiger with alcohol still in her veins. On local radio, a host laughed nervously, suggesting maybe vodka had given her courage. On social media, a photo of the bottle found in her locker circulated alongside her image in the hospital. The bottle became a symbol of debate. Some saw it as proof of recklessness. Others argued that without it, Clara might never have had the audacity to stand against the beast. The line between admiration and judgment blurred. A group of neighbors organized a collection for Clara: flowers, letters, and a hand-woven blanket. They carried the bundle to the hospital, where she was still recovering. But outside, they found a small protest. Some held handwritten signs. "No to animal cruelty. Blame the circus." Others waved signs with hearts and the words, "Thank you, Clara." The contrast captured her new place in the public's imagination. Heroine and villain at once. Inside the hospital, Clara's superiors debated her fate. Some argued she had saved lives and deserved recognition. Others pointed out that drinking on duty could not be ignored. Protocols, sanctions, and tributes were all discussed in the same breath. The administration faced a dilemma: how to judge someone who had broken the rules but carried out a heroic act. In her room, Clara overheard fragments of the conversation through the door. Each word, each murmur, pierced her mind. She felt exposed, vulnerable, torn between shame and pride. Across town, arguments grew louder. A teacher told his students that while courage was admirable, violence against animals should never be celebrated. Some parents criticized him, insisting Clara had only acted in self-defense. In the hair salon, a woman swore the nurse had been possessed by some supernatural force. At the market, a shopkeeper had already printed T-shirts with the slogan, "Clara the Tigress," though many found it in poor taste. The duality was clear. The heroine turned into a caricature, the monster into a local star. Journalists from nearby cities crowded the hospital for a statement. Clara wasn't in any state to speak, and the staff limited access. That didn't stop newspapers from printing sensational stories, blending fact and speculation. One headline read, "The drunk nurse who killed a tiger. Hero or hazard?" Another claimed the circus planned to sue her for destroying their star animal. The distortions multiplied, fed by curiosity and morbid fascination. In the staff room, two nurses argued. One defended Clara fiercely. She saved the whole village. Without her, who knows what might have happened? The other, more skeptical, countered. But she drank on the job. What kind of example is that? In everyday conversations, another battle raged, over the reputation of a woman who had acted on more than professional duty. It was as though society itself didn't know where to place her. Hero, victim, culprit, savior, or foolhardy. Meanwhile, the circus struggled with its own fallout. Animal rights groups accused them of negligence. Others demanded compensation for the fear and damage caused. The owners couldn't decide whether to thank Clara for stopping their escaped beast, or to sue her for ruining their show. At the police station, a file was opened to sort out responsibilities. The papers spoke of laws, permits, and liability. But outside those walls, the conversation circled heavier words: courage, morality, blame. Clara, meanwhile, was caught in a mental limbo. She received anonymous letters, some hailing her as a heroine, others insulting her for killing the tiger. She overheard doctors whispering about a possible suspension, yet her co-workers still visited with eyes full of respect. She looked in the mirror at her forming scars. She thought about the bottle, about her inner demons, about the strength she had found. She asked herself whether her courage came from drunkenness or from something deeper. Her rage at loneliness, her hunger to matter. The answer was unclear. The duality of judgment weighed on her. To some, she was a savior, a symbol of defiance. To others, she was a monster, for drinking, for killing an animal, for breaking the rules. That mixture of views left her divided. In her heart, she knew she had acted to survive, to protect others. But she also knew that her road to self-forgiveness and public acceptance would be long and tangled. As time passed, the story of Clara and the tiger became a tale everyone in town knew. The children who once whispered it grew up and told it to their own kids, embellishing it with details that had shifted over the years. The nurse who drank on her shift became, in some versions, a supernatural heroine. In others, the tragic figure of an inevitable downfall. The town's memory, with all its flaws and virtues, made its own judgment. In the first weeks, the division of opinions was sharp. Some remembered Clara as the woman who saved the town from a predator, an undeniable heroine. Others insisted on her drunkenness, saying she acted without thought, that recklessness had driven her to face the beast. The comments polarized: madness or courage, irresponsibility or sacrifice. The arguments slipped into family dinners, cafe counters, even Sunday sermons. As weeks turned into years, the rawness of that night transformed. The image of the blood-stained park faded and gave way to legend. Some said Clara had been blessed by a saint who protected animals. Others believed the tiger was an embodiment of evil that needed to be defeated. A few swore the night had been divine punishment for allowing circuses with animals. Collective memory became a canvas, each person painting their own version of the truth. Clara tried to carry on after she recovered. She returned to the hospital, but never again took the night shift. Nights brought too many memories. She accepted a sanction and went to therapy. She gave up the bottle. She kept working with patients, but always felt the weight of people's eyes, the whispers behind her back. Some greeted her with admiration and curiosity. Others avoided her altogether. She was never again just Clara the nurse. Her identity was bound forever to the tiger. A year later, a commemorative iron plaque was set in the town square. Its inscription read, "In memory of the night when a nurse faced a tiger to protect her town." Courage and fear live side by side in this story. Some were moved to tears reading it. Others thought it glorified violence. Beside it, a local artist unveiled a statue of a tiger with a calm expression. The duality was cast in stone. Heroine and beast, memory and forgetting. Journalists who had once covered the story returned each anniversary, producing reports about how the town had changed. On camera, locals recounted ever more fantastic versions. That Clara had fought barefoot, that the tiger had spoken before it died. Exaggeration fed the curiosity of outsiders. Visitors arrived to see the park, take photos with the statue, ask neighbors if the tale was real. Some bought souvenirs, t-shirts, keychains, mugs. The event became an attraction. Over time, the circus that had lost its tiger disappeared. After lawsuits and debts, the owners left and never returned. In town, debates over circuses with animals raged on. Many opposed their comeback, using Clara's story as an example of danger. Authorities passed stricter laws. Still, the memory lived on, a reminder of how thin the line can be between the ordinary and the extraordinary. For Clara, the story took on another meaning with time. At first, it hurt to talk about it. Reliving the images was too raw. Later, as people grew more interested in the myth than in her, she felt a strange relief. She realized that once stories leave the lips of those who live them, they no longer belong to them. People take them, reshape them, judge them, use them for their own ends. Collective memory never seeks absolute truth. It seeks a story that fits its needs. On quiet nights, sitting on her porch, Clara would reflect. She wondered how her life might have been without that encounter. She thought of the tiger, a creature torn from its habitat, turned into spectacle, then freed by human error. She thought of her own life, of loneliness, the bottle, the reckless impulse that pushed her to stand against the beast. She asked herself what that moment had been. Alcohol-fueled madness? An unexplainable miracle of courage? A punishment life had chosen for her? To pay for invisible sins? She never found a single answer. With time, the judgment of memory never tipped fully to one side. Some remembered her with admiration, others with suspicion and critique. The story of the nurse and the tiger became one of those tales each person interprets their own way, where truth mixes with imagination and with the need to make sense of the inexplicable. The town moved on, but it never forgot that cursed night. And the same question still hung in the air. Madness, miracle, or punishment? Maybe a little of all three. Or maybe the answer simply shifts depending on who tells the story. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell, and give a like so you won't miss more stories like this one. See you next time!